Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Bwaaa! That sound right there. It's not just Hank Hill being startled. It is a whole philosophy colliding with reality, because Hank Hill does not want reality to be complicated. He wants it to be maintained. He wants the lawn edged, the truck serviced, the propane flowing clean and dependable through a properly inspected line. He wants people to say what they mean what they say, and preferably not say any of it while he's trying to eat a meal. And yet, week after week, Hank Hill is forced to confront the fact that life is full of other people. People with feelings, people with schemes, people with emotional emergencies, people who have decided, for reasons known only to themselves and perhaps one regional manager at Megalomart, to make a hobby of chaos. That is where Hank gets interesting. Because King of the Hill is not just a show about Texas, propane, adolescence, and the spiritual damage done by having a neighbor like Dale Gribble. It's a show about how a person tries to remain decent when the world keeps refusing to be orderly. And that makes Hank Hill surprisingly useful as a way into Stoicism. Not Stoicism with a lowercase s, the thing where somebody says they're stoic because they have not shown emotion since the Carter administration. I mean Stoicism, the old Greek and Roman philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, the one that says we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control our judgments, our actions, and how we meet what happens. Now, Hank would probably hate being compared to a philosopher. He would hear Stoicism, assume it was some kind of European dessert, and say, I do not care for that. But the comparison is worth making because Hank has some deeply stoic instincts. He believes in self-control. He believes behavior matters more than excuses. He believes a man should do what's in front of him. The catch, and there is always a catch with Hank, is that he sometimes mistakes emotional repression for self-control. He mistakes tradition for virtue, and he is so committed to being the competent adult in the room that he can struggle to recognize that sometimes the competent adult needs to apologize, listen, and he has no earthly idea of what's going on. So today I want to talk about Hank Hill and Stoicism, where Hank embodies the movement, where he completely misses the point, and why a cartoon about propane may have more to say about practical ethics than most productivity content currently trying to get into your wallet. And here we go.
Stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. The prairie skies are wide and high, deep in the heart of Texas, deep in the heart of Texas.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Let's talk about Hank Hill and the Stoic in the alley. The basic Stoic idea is pretty simple, even if living it is not. There are things within your control, your choices, your efforts, your character, your response. And then there are things outside your control, other people, the weather, the economy, whether Dale has purchased a new piece of survival equipment from a man named Guns and Ammo who lives out by the lake. The Stoic project is learning not to waste your life fighting the second category. Now, that doesn't mean you become passive. It means you put your energy where it can actually do some good. And Hank Hill lives like this. Whether he would use those words or not, he still lives like that. When something needs doing, Hank does it. When there's a problem at work, he handles the problem. When there's a leak, he finds the leak. When a customer is confused about propane, Hank does not turn it into an abstract debate about the nature of truth. He explains the difference between propane and butane, usually with a level of intensity normally reserved for hostage negotiations. Hank's worldview begins with responsibility. He believes the right thing is usually not mysterious. Show up, know your job, do it well, Take care of people depending on you. Do not cut corners. Do not create extra trouble because you wanted to feel clever for 5 minutes. That is very, very close to Stoic virtue. The Stoics were not interested in appearing impressive. They were interested in becoming reliable. Wisdom, courage, justice, self-discipline, those were the virtues. Not fame, not wealth, not winning every argument, not getting a standing ovation at the Arlen Chamber of Commerce banquet. In a lot of ways, Hank has that down. He doesn't need the whole town to celebrate him. He needs to know he did his job and he did it right. That the tank is safe, the lawn is even, that Bobby is somewhere within a reasonable range of normal, even if that range has to have been expanded considerably over the years. Hank's sense of dignity comes from competence. And I want to say something nice about that, because competence gets treated as kind of boring right now. We live in a time that rewards hot takes, personal brands, confidence without preparation, and people who call themselves visionaries because they've learned how to make a 3-slide deck with a lot of empty space in it. Hank is not a visionary. Hank is a person you want to be standing nearby when something catches fire. And that part matters. The Stoic version of that is not be emotionally unavailable, and it is be useful when usefulness is required. Hank, on his best days, well, he's very useful. The difference between calm and bottled up. Hank is not a Stoic sage. He's not Marcus Aurelius with a truck payment, because Stoicism is not about refusing to feel things. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings of the philosophy. Stoics didn't believe you should become a rock. They believed you should examine your emotional reactions so they don't take control of your life. There's a difference between feeling anger and being ruled by anger. There's a difference between feeling grief and deciding grief has made your life meaningless. There's a difference between being embarrassed and making every decision afterward just to avoid being embarrassed again. Hank has a hard time with this distinction. He really, really does. He's absolutely full of feelings. The man has feelings the way a propane tank has pressure. Contained, useful, and managed correctly, and potentially alarming, you can ignore the warning signs. But Hank often sees the mere presence of an emotion as a threat to order. He doesn't want to talk about fear. He doesn't want to talk about shame. He doesn't want to talk about sadness unless it can be addressed with a practical solution, preferably one available at a hardware store. And you can understand why. I mean, Hank was raised by Cotton Hill, a man who treated tenderness like a contagious disease. Hank learned early that vulnerability could be used against you, so he built a life around steadiness, routine, decency, being the guy who doesn't fall apart. And I mean, that's fairly understandable. But it creates a problem. If your entire identity depends on being the stable one, then any feeling you cannot immediately organize can start to look like failure. Stoicism, at least the good version, would tell Hank that the feeling is not failure. The question is, what do you do next? You can be uncomfortable and still be kind. You can be confused and still be present. You can be embarrassed and still learn something. And I believe that that's where Hank's story keeps moving. It's usually because Bobby forces it to be. Because Bobby Hill is the uncontrolled variable. Bobby is the thing Hank cannot control. He is, in Stoic terms, an external. Hank can guide Bobby, he can teach him, he can set rules, he can attempt to introduce him to the joys of a well-adjusted lawnmower, but Hank cannot turn Bobby into a smaller version of Hank. And I think that is one of the great emotional engines of King of the Hill. Hank wants Bobby to be okay. That part's simple. The problem is that Hank initially defines okay in terms of what he recognizes. Strength looks like football, confidence looks like practical knowledge, and maturity looks like keeping your voice at an acceptable volume in a restaurant, your inside voice. Bobby, well, he's got a different toolkit. Bobby is theatrical, he's sensitive, he likes comedy, performance, food, odd little social observations, and saying things everyone else is afraid to say because he has not yet learned why they're afraid to say it. Sometimes Bobby's lazy, sometimes he's gullible, sometimes he's a 12-year-old boy with access to the worst possible influence at exactly the wrong moment. But Bobby is also emotionally open in a way that Hank is not. He feels things all the way through. He gets excited without apologizing for it. He is hurt without hiding it very well, and he has a flexibility that Hank often lacks. That makes Bobby difficult for Hank, but it also makes him good for Hank. because Bobby keeps putting Hank in situations where his standard responses don't work. Hank can't solve Bobby with a lecture about responsibility. He can't repair Bobby with a socket wrench. And he can't out-stubborn Bobby because Bobby's weirdness is not always defiance. Sometimes it's just who he is.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
And Hank's best moments as a father come when he realizes that very thing. Not when he suddenly understands Bobby completely. He usually does not. Hank will probably never fully understand why his son might choose performance over football or expressive cooking over quietly eating a sandwich. But Hank learns a more important lesson. Love is not contingent on familiarity. That is profoundly Stoic correction. The Stoics believed that every person belongs to a larger human community. The old world for that was cosmopolitanism, not in the everybody has an airport lounge membership sense, but the idea that our circle of concern should expand beyond people exactly like us. Hank starts with a small circle, family, friends, neighborhood, country, things with labels he recognizes. Bobby slowly makes that circle larger. Hank learns that being a good father does not mean making Bobby more comfortable for Hank to understand. It means helping Bobby become a decent version of himself. And that is way harder, but it's way better. Hank's real value is justice. When people think about Hank Hill, they usually think about discipline, the lawn, the work ethic, the strong aversion to frivolous. But I think Hank's strongest Stoic virtue is justice. Not justice in the courtroom sense, justice in the sense of giving people their due. Hank believes people should be treated fairly. He may not always arrive at that belief elegantly. He may walk around it for 3 acts, complain to the guys in the alley, and accidentally say something that would make Peggy stare at him over her reading glasses. But he ultimately gets there. He'll stand up for people when he sees them being mistreated. He's deeply bothered by dishonesty, exploitation, and people abusing a little bit of power just because they have it. Hank does not like bullies. That is an absolute truth. This is partially personal. Hank grew up with Cotton, taught him what power looks like when it has no mercy attached to it. But it's also moral. Hank's world runs on an assumption that people should carry their share and not make life worse for the people around them. You can see this in how he treats work. Hank respects people who do jobs well, whatever the job is. He might have his preferences. Lord knows he has his preferences. But he understands the dignity of doing something properly. And that is more meaningful than it sounds. A lot of contemporary moral language is big and abstract. We talk about values while being awful to the person taking our order. We talk about community while treating every inconvenience as someone else's fault. We talk about authenticity while making sure nobody else gets to have a bad day around us. Hank's ethics are smaller than that, but they're real. Don't cheat people. Don't humiliate people for fun. Don't neglect what's been entrusted to you. Don't act like the rules are for everyone else. That's not a complete moral system, but it's a sturdy beginning. And in a world where a lot of people are trying to make themselves look good, there is something almost radical about a character whose every philosophy needs a stress test. For Hank, that stress test is Dale. Dale Gribble is what happens when a person gives total control to every thought that enters his head. A new idea does not arrive in Dale's mind and get examined, it gets deputized. Dale is not Stoic. Dale is the opposite of Stoic. A Stoic asks, is this judgment accurate? Is this reaction useful? What can I actually control? Dale asks, what if the moon is bugged? And to be clear, Dale is funny. Dale is one of the great comedic characters because he is so convinced that the world is a conspiracy against him while being personally responsible for roughly 60% of the chaos he experiences. But Dale gives us a useful contrast. Hank is grounded because he trusts the ordinary world. He trusts that things have causes, that a problem can usually be identified, and that most questions do not require a bunker. Dale cannot accept ordinary explanations because ordinary explanations do not make him feel special enough. If the world is full of secret plots, then Dale is not just a guy having a tough time, he's an important witness. That is a trap plenty of us fall into, just with better Wi-Fi. We mistake intensity for insight. We think being suspicious makes us discerning. We think if we can locate a villain for every inconvenience, we will not have to sit with uncertainty or complexity or the possibility that we might be wrong. The Stoic response is much less exciting. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you can't control it. Maybe your job is to do the next decent thing anyway. Hank has that instinct. Dale, no, he doesn't. He does not. And Hank's friendship with Dale is one of the show's quiet moral achievements. Hank doesn't endorse Dale's worldview. He's often exhausted by it. He has, in the most Hank Hill way possible, endured conspiracy theories because the man delivering them is still his friend. And that part, well, it matters. Stoicism does not ask us to agree with everybody. It asks us to recognize the common humanity of people we find difficult. And if you can recognize common humanity in Dale Gribble, you're doing some advanced work. Now, Peggy, her pride and the need to be right. If Hank struggles with emotion, Peggy struggles with pride. Peggy Hill desperately wants to be seen as intelligent, capable, and important. And she is capable. She is ambitious. She is resilient. She can be brave in ways Hank is not. But Peggy also has a problem that the Stoics knew very well. She gives too much power to external validation. She wants recognition. She wants status. She wants someone to say, Peggy, you were right all along, preferably in front of an audience. And that can make her exhausting. The reason Peggy works as a character, though, is that the show doesn't treat her confidence as a simple joke. Her ego is armor, too. Peggy wants to matter because she's spent so much of her life feeling underestimated. The trouble comes when she tries to make herself matter by making other people smaller. That's the moment where her instincts become unstoic. She is no longer asking, what's the right thing to do? She's asking, what story does this tell about me? And if we're honest, that one lands a little close to home. Because the modern version of Peggy's problem is absolutely everywhere. We can turn every ordinary decision into a personal brand exercise. We can make helping someone into performance. We can take a small disagreement and turn it into a referendum on whether we are smart, moral, or interesting enough. The Stoics would say, let go of the applause. Do the thing because it is right. Do the thing because it is right. And Peggy, on her best days, gets there. She can defend people. She can work through embarrassment. She can learn, although not always quietly. That is just Peggy. But she reminds us that moral growth sometimes means releasing the need to be the hero of every story. Now, Bill Dauterive and what we owe to people. The most emotionally difficult Stoic question in King of the Hill has to be Bill. Bill is lonely, he's needy, he's often his worst enemy, he's been hurt badly, and he carries that hurt into almost every relationship he has. He can be hard to be around. And that's exactly why he matters. Because it's easy to be kind to people who make kindness easy. It's easy to show up for the friend who is successful, funny, attractive, calm, and prepared to split the bill without creating an international incident. Bill, well, he doesn't offer that. Bill offers sadness, strange choices, and the very real possibility that he'll become emotionally attached to the first person who brings him soup. But Hank and the guys, they don't abandon him. They joke with him, absolutely. They fail him, sometimes. They do not always know what to say, and they are certainly not a model of emotionally fluent friendship. But they keep him in the circle. This gets at something more important in Stoicism that gets missed when people make it all about individual toughness. Stoicism is not just self-help for people who own expensive watches. It's an obligation to other people built into it. We're social creatures. We have duties to one another. The question is not simply, how do I become unbothered? The question is, how do I remain a good person while life bothers me? Which is a much different question. Bill makes demands on Hank's patience, and often Hank doesn't meet those demands perfectly. But he keeps trying. He keeps showing up. He keeps making room. That's not flashy, but it's a form of love. Now, there are limits of Hank's stoicism. So is Hank Hill a Stoic? Well, Not exactly. Hank has stoic virtues, but he also has some real blind spots. He's too attached to control. He can be judgmental when people do not live by his rules. He sometimes confuses discomfort with danger. And he has a tendency to think that if a feeling can't be fixed, it should maybe be kept in a locked shed until it learns some manners. But his limitations are part of why he is valuable. Hank is not a wise man floating above the mess of life. He is a man in the mess trying to act with decency using the tools he has. Sometimes those tools are excellent. Sometimes he's trying to fix a relationship with a socket set too. But he does learn. Not all at once, not really in a tiny arc, not with a speech that would get clipped and posted over sad piano music. He learns through repetition. He learns that Bobby does not need to become him. He learns that Peggy's ambition is not always an insult to his way of life. He learns that Bill's pain is not a nuance just because it's inconvenient to him. He learns that Con's arrogance can conceal real fear. He learns that Dale can be completely wrong and still be his friend. That is what moral progress often looks like. No transformation, no big deal, just an adjustment. A person gets a little less certain, a little more generous, a little more able to distinguish between this makes me uncomfortable and this is actually wrong. That is not glamorous wisdom, but it is durable wisdom. Now, what can Hank Hill teach us? The world Hank Hill lives in is smaller than ours, at least on the surface. He has a neighborhood, a job, a family, an alley, a few friends, and an extremely specific professional interest. Our world is louder, more connected, more determined to make every opinion a personality test. But the Stoic lesson in King of the Hill still applies. You can't control whether people understand you. You can't control whether the world rewards good work fairly. You can't control whether somebody nearby is having a crisis built around a new supplement, a political theory, or a lawn ornament that's become spiritually significant. You can control whether you act with integrity. You can control whether you keep your word. You can control whether you treat people with fairness and fairly. You can control whether you make a hard moment worse just to protect your pride, and you can control whether you show up or not. This is the Hank Hill version of Stoicism. Not a marble statue, not a marble statue, not a motivational quote on a black background, not a podcast host telling you your emotions are a software bug. Just do your job. Take care of your people. Do not let panic make your decisions. Don't let pride make your decisions. And when life gets strange, and it will get strange, try not to become Dale. Those are pretty good rules. Now, Hank Hill is not a Stoic philosopher. He would object to the sandals. He would have concerns about the robes. And if Marcus Aurelius started talking about accepting fate, Hank would probably ask whether Marcus had checked the pressure valve. But Hank understands something the Stoics understood too. Character is built in ordinary moments, in the way you handle a problem, in the way you treat the people closest to you, in whether you can accept that you do not control everything and still do the next right thing. And honestly, that's about as close to wisdom as most of us are going to get before somebody knocks on the door with a problem that cannot be solved by a reasonable person. Bwaaa! If you enjoyed this, subscribe, hit like, and find us anywhere you get your podcasts. We will see you next time, and I believe that leaves us with one thing left to say, and that one thing is Wimatanye to you all, and to all of you, a good Wimatanye.